The Pear Affair, Chapter 25. The Bernard's cave was at the base of a ramp that led up to a garage door. On the other side was an underground car park. Patrick and Mimi led the way up a flight of stairs, through another door and into a long corridor. Now they were above ground. Tall windows looked out onto a quadrangle. A nervous shiver skittered up and down Nell's spine. It smelled like summer's end, chalk dust and wax polish on the parquet flooring. "This is where Pascal teaches," explained Patrick. "No one's here at the moment. Term starts in a few weeks' time." Out on the street, Nell blinked. Everything was so bright and loud. Traffic whizzed past. A market was in full swing. The terraces of the cafes were packed with people clinking glasses and enjoying an early lunch. It seemed odd to Nell that everything was carrying on as normal. But of course it was. Time always went marching on. The metro station was called Montparnasse. So they were on the left bank. "I know where I am now," said Nell, picturing the metro map in her head. Montparnasse was on line 12, the black line that cut across Paris from north to south. She could almost sense her inner compass resetting, her pattern of Paris reassembling, everything slotting into place. It was only a few stops from here to Concorde and the Den. She was just about to say goodbye when she stopped, dimly aware that something had been flickering at the nethermost reaches of her mind. What was it? A thought that needed explaining, a fact that had been missing. And then she remembered. "Mimi, why do you call your mouse torch Mini Minou?" The question took Mimi by surprise. "Because of the cradle," she said. "It was in the cave when we arrived. The name Minou is scratched into it in tiny letters." Nell didn't know what she would have done if the others hadn't been in the den, so it was with the most enormous sense of relief that she heard their voices. "I'm back!" she shouted as she burst into the little cavern, and then had to battle tears as she watched their faces break into delighted grins, and they all leapt up and enveloped her in a great hug. "It worked!" said Soutine. "What worked?" she asked, confused. "The sleeping draught," said Paulette. "Soutine sprinkled it in when he was making the croissants," said Paul. "It's his grandma's recipe, top secret, all made from herbs," added Neige. "And they won't wake up until tomorrow morning," smiled Xavier. "So they'll be out for the count for at least 24 hours, right, Soutine?" "Right," Soutine said proudly. "Oh, Soutine," said Nell, and they smiled at each other, a proper smile. Up until now, she hadn't been sure Soutine had trusted her or even liked her. Of the 5 children, he had been the least welcoming. But he had done this, entirely for her. "But how did you know where I was?" "I followed you, of course," said Neige. "Did you think I'd just stand by and watch you get kidnapped right under my very nose? I jumped in a taxi. I've always wanted to say follow that car like in a detective movie. And I did. Tailed you all the way over to Corvisart." A warm feeling spread through Nell's entire body. This is what it felt like to have proper friends. "And you even found your way back here," said Zav, with real admiration. "I told them you've got a map inside your head." "But why did they take you?" asked Soutine. "The ladies and the municipal department men. What do they want?" "It's all to do with the mayor," she said. "He's desperate to know where my parents are. And you know the gobbledygook with the VH stamped on it? Well, he is VH." And she told them about his ring. Paul was sent to retrieve Melinda's bag from its hiding place. It had lost some of its former shine, the diamond clasp and gold chain having become dulled by cave dust. Quickly, Nell dug out the paper. She passed it to Xavier. "Hold it up to the light," she instructed. "Why?" he said. "Just try," insisted Nell. Xavier held the paper against one of the light bulbs that was strung across the ceiling of the cave, but the light was too weak. Nell unstrapped her head torch and flicked on the switch. Xav held the paper against the beam. "What can you see?" demanded Nell. "A sort of pattern in the paper," said Xavier slowly. "It's called a watermark," said Nell. "Can you read it?" "It says Pantastique." "But," said Xav. "So the mayor," Neige took the paper from Xavier, her finger hovered over the tiny VH stamp, "has got something to do with Pantastique." "Yes," said Nell. "I watched Cigarette Holder take dictation from the mayor yesterday. She didn't use proper writing, it was all squiggles and wriggles just like this. I asked what it was and she said shorthand. She learned it at some place called the Duployant School. I bet this is her writing too." "So all we have to do," said Xav, "is find someone who knows shorthand, someone who can translate this gobbledygook, and then we'll understand what the mayor is up to and where this fits in." He was holding the small plastic S13 dish in the palm of his hand. "And why my parents stole it," said Nell. She looked at them. And there's something else. It's to do with Pear. She told them what the mayor had said. A warrant? So she is on the run, said Soutine. Maybe, she said. It sounded exciting, but it really wasn't. Someone who was on the run could end up in jail. Don't worry now, said Zav. If we can work out what the trouble the mayor and your parents are mixed up in is, maybe that's how we make them talk about Pear. We need to find someone who can do shorthand, asked Paulette. Like a secretary or a reporter, added Paul. Something pinged inside Nell's head. She grabbed the gobbledygook and the plastic dish and stuffed them back into Melinda's bag. We need to go to Belleville straight away and find Emile. The newspaper's headquarters were at 5 Rue des Italiens. Le Monde emblazoned across the front of the building in letters 1 metre high. What can I do for you? Asked the doorman as they all trooped in. His quiff was as good as Elvis Presley's and his mouth curled up in a smile. We've come to see Colette, said Emile, as though he strolled into newspaper offices every day. She's my sis. She works in the newsroom on the 4th floor. The doorman hesitated. Children didn't normally make a habit of turning up unannounced at such an important newspaper. Sometimes the senior editors came in with their families to give them the tour. Their children would be dressed up in their Sunday best, not like this ragtag lot. But Elvis smoothed his quiff, twiddled his moustache. It was quiet. It was the weekend. And he could see straight away that this skinny kid in the green cap resembled the nervous girl who had started last week. Well, it is a Sunday, he said. The big boss isn't in, and what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. He picked up the phone. Off you go. I'll ring and tell her you're on the way. The lift deposited them in a vast room filled with typewriters and telephones. At the far end they could hear a steady click-clack as someone bashed away at a typewriter. Colette rushed over to greet them. She was all jitters and nerves. Emile, what are you doing here? She asked anxiously. Did I forget something? I've got my lunch. I remembered to feed the cat. Are you locked out? I'll get the key. I'm not locked out or anything, said Emile. We're here because this lot need your help. Colette glanced around as though expecting someone to bark at her any moment, but there were only 2 or 3 other people in the room, and their heads were down. What do you mean they want my help? Remember Nell? You met her in Perrine's apartment. Colette's eyes met Nell's. Oh, it's about your friend. She turned back to Emile. You only asked me to start digging around this morning. I haven't had a chance yet. It doesn't matter, said Nell hurriedly. She wished Colette wouldn't look so anxious. It was making her feel nervous too. She pulled the gobbledygook out of Melinda's bag and handed it over. Emile says you can do shorthand. Can you tell us what this means? Colette scanned the loops and swirls, her lips moving silently as she read. A sudden intake of breath, a gasp. Where did you get this? She asked, turning to them, her eyes wide. Why, what does it say? Colette was gripping the paper so hard her knuckles had gone white. Her gaze, which had been so unsure before now, was razor sharp. She stabbed a finger at the top of the page. It says, Terms and Usage for the Culture and Propagation of Spore 13. The children stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. S13, the small plastic dish. Something had told Nell not to open it. Now all of a sudden she knew why. She could picture the older girls at school dressed in white lab coats doing interesting looking experiments. She wanted to join in, but the science teacher had said she'd have to wait until she was in the 5th form. It was a Petri dish for growing bacteria in. Didn't they call the thing that is destroying the boulangerie a spore? Nell said. She remembered watching the news that first night. Bacteria form spores, said Nej, so someone has actually grown this stuff on purpose. Yes, said Colette, still scanning the gobbledygook. These are instructions. Look what it says here. How to grow the bacteria and what it can affect. The list is endless. Bread and groceries and wine. So it's the mayor who's behind it all, said Soutine in utter disgust, poisoning the boulangerie and opening his own stores instead. And then Nell remembered. She'd been standing at the dining room door while her parents muttered about magnificent foods. They'd been discussing falling profits. They were worried about the board and the stipulations. Melinda had said they had to find a solution, and the solution wasn't buy one get one free. What had been her exact words? Nell screwed her eyes up tight. That was it. Melinda had said they had to kill the competition. A cold stone plopped down into the very depths of her stomach. Could it be that her parents were going to take this S13 and use it in England? And just as the thing had wreaked havoc in the boulangerie across Paris, it would do the very same to every grocery store at home?